Riddle me this. Philosophical zombies. What are they? Do they pose a threat to you? And if they're so philosophical, why do they want your brains? Okay, don't worry, I will explain this next part, so hang with me. The philosophical zombie thought experiment theorizes a thing that is identical to a human but lacks the ability to have qualia. It raises questions relating to the hard problem of consciousness. While it doesn't necessarily support a more spiritual view of the world, it definitely is regarded as an anti-physicalism thought experiment. If that doesn't mean anything to you, perfect. That means that my efforts to translate it to English were not in vain. In a more understandable but less encompassing way, the philosophical zombie is a human with, in a sense, no point of view. It still reacts to things as a normal human would, but it doesn't experience them. While we'd be able to see the color red as part of our experience being alive, a zombie would only be able to identify the color red, analogous to maybe how a camera would be able to identify it. There's no conscious experience behind the computational aspects of the zombie's brain. I like this thought experiment a lot. It reminds me of the mass hysteria about synths in Fallout 4. It sets up a kind of, which one of us isn't a real human kind of scenario. The only problem is that, like most philosophy topics, the cool concept hides behind a near undecipherable academic language. Be honest, you don't want to read the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy page for zombies. Well, maybe if you found your way here, but regardless. However, philosophy often builds upon itself, and there are some prerequisite ideas before understanding the significance of this thought experiment. Going back to my statement on what zombies were originally, these are the terms you are probably unfamiliar with. That being because they are all highly formal jargon or ideas that never escape the academic world. I'm going to briefly explain them so that you can start to understand the questions that this thought experiment presents. The first prerequisite is to understand what qualia actually means. We've all probably heard the classic deep shower thought. Yo man, what if we don't see the same red, broski? What if your red is my green? That thought can be used to analyze what qualia is because this is fundamentally a question about it. More specifically, it's a question about whether or not qualia is the same from person to person. There's an intrinsic experience that is red that can't really be explained in words. And that experience is the qualia you are subjected to when seeing red. The second prerequisite is an ongoing problem, the hard problem of consciousness. Think of the place where all your qualia combines into an experience, your point of view, your consciousness. What allows this to exist? In neurology, we can map parts of the human brain and say, oh, this section is for visual processing of images. What science can't seem to do is to explain why this is accompanied by qualia and why there's a consciousness to experience qualia at all. What about the brain is special enough to allow a consciousness? Is the brain special at all? Or, in our case, is the physical part of the brain alone what allows for this consciousness? Some regard the hard problem of consciousness to be inherently unanswerable. But there are attempts at doing so, like in the next prerequisite, physicalism. Physicalism relates to this by saying that consciousness is purely a physical phenomenon, because everything is a purely physical phenomenon. In the eyes of a physicalist, there is no supernatural or metaphysical influence on the world, because reality solely exists on the physical plane. However, it's difficult to encompass everyone's belief when talking about such a large ideology. There seems to be a discussion in the philosophy of religion on whether or not true physicalism allows for religious belief, but that's not important for this topic. The bottom line of this belief is that our brains are wholly at fault for consciousness because they are physical and nothing else contributes. Okay, now back to the definition we set up for the philosophical zombie experiment. We're going to decode it using what we know now. So, from the top, the philosophical zombie lacks the ability to have qualia. It reacts to the world analogous to how a math equation reacts to the numbers you plug into it. He doesn't truly experience them or have a point of view. The goal of the thought experiment is to make a point about the hard problem of consciousness, or the origins of qualia. We don't know why anyone is conscious or experiencing the world, and this is another talking point in the effort to understand why. Physicalism says that all conscious states can be traced back to physical phenomenon like neurology. The existence of philosophical zombies would disprove physicalism as a total answer to the hard problem of consciousness. So, following the logic train all the way, humans are conscious. Zombies are exact physical replicas of humans, but are not conscious. Consciousness is not caused by physical form. Physicalism is not a total answer to why we are conscious. But because there's no absolute clear answer to any pure thought experiment, people have different takeaways from this. Most of the arguments are about whether or not philosophical zombies can exist, rather than if they actually do. The physicalists find this to be a flawed experiment because of that. They don't think that the zombies are actually possible. I'm not going to cover the flaws in this video, but if you want to find more information about it, I will link a video that does. The video I linked is not so much an introduction into philosophy, as much as it is an actual breakdown of the logic that accompanies this experiment. Anyway, that pretty much wraps up the video. Time for me to play the YouTube game. This is something that I put a lot of effort into. If this is something that you'd like to see more of, or to help others see it too, liking and subscribing actually helps a lot. I've also set up a Tumblr account for general submissions. If you feel artistically inspired, feel free to submit it and I'll feature it. Seriously, it doesn't even have to look good. I'll cherish your Microsoft Paint stick figure if you have the passion to make it. Anyways, I hope you have the strength to find something you love about yourself today. You deserve it.